My biggest takeaway podcast.
Welcome back to My Biggest Takeaway podcast, where I have a good friend of mine, Mr. George Bryant, who I like to call the customer journey master, who has worked in many different businesses. And if you're not sure what a customer journey is, we're probably going to talk about it. So, this is who I've learned so much from, working side by side in other people's businesses, along with shooting the shit and him coming in and really giving me advice as a friend and also as a mentor, man. So, thank you so much for being on here today.
Oh, dude, I would do this with you all day, every day. Like, of all of that, my favorite was actually when we just got to be in Vegas and like talk,
Yeah.
not like on a call, on a podcast, in the back end of somebody else's business. Like, hey, we think the same. Oh, I fucking love you. Let's work next to each other. Like, I love it, man. I'm honored to be
So
here.
that was 13 months ago.
Yeah.
And I told you what I was going to do with the business.
Uh-huh.
And we haven't really talked much about it since, but here we are. So I've had a lot of changes. We might dive into some of that as well. But I want people to really understand what a sales cycle actually looks like.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And that's a very broad term, right? Because we have the pre-acquisition, then the post-acquisition, and then the retention side. And
Yeah.
one thing that really stood out to me in every conversation is what's the next step?
Yeah.
Right. And so for those that are not sure what the next step is, it's literally when somebody comes into your ecosystem, what do? What's their next step? So let's say they give you their information and you send them a text or an email. When are they supposed to hear from you again?
Yeah.
And what George is really great about doing is letting that person know when I'm going to reach out again, so you're not left in the abyss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this really worked for me best on the post-purchase. And I'll let you kind of dive in a second on what you call that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's understanding, like, when somebody pays you money or buys your product or your service, what happens? Do we just collect their money and be like, we'll be in touch? And that's where buyer remorse comes in, right?
Yeah.
So in your own words, I know you have a name for it. What do you call that post-purchase?
The black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it. I'm going to answer your question. Then when you give me a minute, I kind of want to define it too, but I call that hole the triangle of death. Right. And it's literally the most notorious black hole that people are convinced that doesn't exist, that gets in the way of them actually accomplishing what they want to accomplish with their business. And they're convinced it's their offer, it's their customers, they're horrible customers. And I'm like, nah. I'm pretty much like 97.8% sure after doing this for 20 years, it's this one hole that they fall into that we forget about because we spend 9 months of our life courting them to agree to marry us. And then we're like, oh, they got our credit card. Boom, leave them at the altar. Good luck. Right. And so, yeah, that's what that zone is. And it's notorious. And the challenge is that people think about customer journeys linearly. And then in that same lens, in understanding that it's not just when somebody gives us their credit card, it's really at any checkpoint in their relationship with us as a brand where they're moving somewhere else. And so that's also after they give us their email or they exchange their phone number with us, or we get off stage and they give us their business card. That same gaps and those same holes exist, and we forget about them because we get so hyper focused on the ones that are just ready to give us our credit card. We forget that the mistakes we're making to the other ones are the things preventing them from giving us their credit card.
So oftentimes I think we focus on the ones like the shooting the fish in the barrel.
Yeah.
It's like the ones that just want to give it.
Yeah.
They're just like above and beyond excited and like they don't care.
Yeah.
I always call this the 3%, right? Because the average website converts at 3%.
1,000%.
And what happens to the other 97? Well, that's where the business is either made or lost.
1,000%.
Right?
1,000%.
So talk about, I think we'll start with the post-purchase.
Yeah. Can I define what a customer journey is?
It's open for interpretation here.
You hit a point in your question that I don't talk about publicly very often, if at any. And so
feel free to leave out any of the nuggets that.
No, I actually
That
kind of
work.
want to include the nuggets because I
Okay.
feel like it'll be applicable. And given this is about takeaway. So, two things that I heard. Number one was like the buying cycle of like what a customer or potential customer goes through, right? I feel like one of the biggest challenges that exists right now is that people truly don't understand that it is not linear and it is truly a series of nodes and touch points that looks like they got shot out of a pinball machine and then ends up at the same destination. And most people lose or create constraint in their business because they try to linearly control what can't be controlled. And then they make decisions based off linear math or linear equations, right? So there's that part. And then the second part is what is a customer journey, right? And so basically, I've been trying to define this for people for 15 years of like, what's the easiest way to think about it? So I always like to relate it to a story. And so if you just think about whatever you do in the lens of a personal trainer, anytime that somebody comes to you in exchange for a piece of information or knowledge, whatever guidance you give them is the journey that you're putting them on. That's the customer journey. It's to get them either to their goal or one step closer to their goal. And if you're just sitting at a coffee shop and someone's like, Mike, you look fucking yoked. How do you do it? I'd love to work with you. And Mike's like, I don't do that anymore. It would be $2,500 a month. But here's what I'd recommend. Go watch this one video on YouTube and then go do this thing. And if you want some inspiration, here's my Instagram. Shoot me a message. And I'd love to support you within reason. So shoot me a DM anytime and I'll get back to you, right? That's still a customer journey. 1,000%, right? But then in the same lens, and he's like, no, man, I make $1 million a month. Screw your old business model. I want to pay you 20 grand a month to just take me through this. And you're like, I'm in. Cool. Right. There's still that lens. And then you would design a protocol or a workout for him. And so it's any step, but where people lose is they try to give people the next 30 steps instead of the next step of the evolution that would be required for the next 29 steps to take over. Right. And so what I tell people is I'm like, if you're selling a physical product, like let's say you're selling Mike's Incredible Coffee stuff, old former Incredible Coffee stuff, right? What I say to people, I was like, you think your biggest fear is that people don't buy your product. That's not my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that people buy your product, don't use it, or don't get the results because then they turn into anti-marketing machines. And as of 2023, 93% of marketing is word of mouth marketing. So our job as a business, as a customer journey, whether they're giving us their credit card or their email or their exchange of information, is if we said we're going to get them to a result, it's not to sell the workout. It's to give it to them in a manner that gets them closer to the result because the result is required for them to actually stick around as a customer or keep using the product in the first place. So that's a customer journey, right? So in the lens of a buying cycle, I think I can teach this in probably 5 minutes. But the way that I describe this is that this is more of a paradigm to understand. Something is a state of thinking to just understand that somebody is always in one of these stages and that customer journeys are circular, which means when somebody listens to this and they're like, who the hell is this crazy tattooed guy that's friends with Mike that makes no sense and probably ends up crying on this podcast? I'm going to go check out his Instagram, right? Well, the moment that begins, that's the start of a customer journey. But then the moment they go click around, collect enough evidence, and they might be like, dude, I want to follow him. The moment they click follow on Instagram, a new customer journey takes place because a checkpoint was put into place. And then another one proceeds, right? So it's not linear and people have to understand that. So when I draw this, I draw it in a circle and I draw an outer circle and an inner circle. So on the outer circle, there's just 5 phases. It's identify, discover, court, enroll, and nurture. Those are the 5 phases. And they're conscious. I call them the conscious customer journey. And what I mean by conscious is we're aware that we're in those phases. So like right now, I live in Montana. It's going to be negative 29 in 2 days. And Rob and I are batting down the hatches to get ready. And I love my car. I have a 2022 Subaru Outback Wilderness that's lifted with a winch, an air compressor, and it can go anywhere, heated seats, like it's functional. So I'm not looking for a car. But if I go wrap that thing around a tree tomorrow, knock on wood, all of a sudden, if that car breaks, I've identified that I need a new car. So the moment I've identified I'm looking for something or I need something, I move from the identify phase into the discover phase. And in the discover phase, I start to narrow down my options. I might be like, oh, let me go look at the new wildernesses, or maybe it's time to get the Bronco or the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'll discover my options. And then once I've narrowed it down, I move into the courting phase and I go collect evidence. I
Mm-hmm.
test drive them. I look at reviews. I start to notice how many gray Broncos are in town. And I'm like, I don't want that color anymore. Right. And then I stay in that phase until I've collected enough evidence to move into the enrollment phase. And the enrollment phase is nothing more than the transaction. That's me walking into the car dealership being like, give me the Bronco. That's what I want. And then the moment I transact, I move into, that's the enrollment phase. The moment I transact, I move into the nurture phase. And that's where I learn how to drive the truck. It becomes a part of my day, a part of my life. And then I'm not in that anymore. But then if I wrap that around a tree 6 months later, guess what? It starts again. So we're consciously aware that we're in that. So underneath identify and discover is the word permission. Seth Godin nailed it. People are looking for permission to see themselves achieving or buying or looking for the things that they want. Marketing gives people permission slips to pursue the things that they're collecting evidence about, to get rid of their buyer's remorse, to justify it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So in the world of fitness, everybody lost for so long or still loses when they tell people what they want versus being like, this is what you could have. Do you want it? Right. So they're looking for a permission slip. Once they're in the courting phase, the word underneath it is just safety, because what they're really doing is collecting enough evidence to justify the purchase decision or opt-in decision, because they also collect evidence to see if you're worth following or opting in for. Do I think the same, feel the same? So what they're really doing in that courting phase is collecting evidence to feel safe enough to then enroll, right? Enroll and then nurture. And underneath enroll and nurture is what I call accountability. Because whether you realize it or not, the moment somebody exchanges their information with you for an email, a credit card, or even sometimes something you promised to email them, they subconsciously expect you to hold them accountable to doing it. And they will resent you if you don't, or make a plan that shows them that it was on them versus us. And so that happens subconsciously. And the reason I say it's important to understand it is that most other marketers do my work for me. They'll go sell programs for 10 grand, convinced they have the solution. The person loses their credit card, remembers hearing me on a podcast saying there was another way, skips the identify, discover, court phase, calls me, says, I'll hire you right now, hits me in the enrollment phase, and then I start nurturing because somebody else did all my hard work for me, right? And so people can come in and out, but if you don't understand that you don't have any control except controlling the checkpoints of when they enter, and then what happens after them is really where people lose the game. And that's where those mistakes come in. And so then that's where I tell people the biggest sins that they make, and even in understanding business, is that focusing on priority, right? And so if you don't have the utmost priority that when somebody comes and buys your best product or your hero SKU or your mastermind or your offer or whatever, that when they drop into it, they have the best chance of results. Why in God's green earth are you trying to put more people into that, thinking it's going to somehow fix a problem? No. What we call that is scaling problems, and then you just scale sucking chest wounds, right? And so even in order of priority, if you want to write something down, I say you shouldn't adopt any more children until you can feed the ones that you have.
Ooh.
Because that's the easiest way to think about it, because you end up with kids that you said you could feed that were hungry at a table and there's no meals prepped. And then we wonder why they don't get results. They ask for refunds or they don't stick on subscriptions. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's you, not them. They're kind of hungry, right? So even in the lens of priority. And so what I tell people is that when you want to write down what you should focus on, you also have to remember, as the leader, the authority, the expert, the owner, the product owner, that your message is only as effective as the recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it without you. And if that doesn't happen, there's only one person stopping your customers from getting results, and it's not them. When they reach out and say, I didn't do it, and then we gaslight them and convince them they didn't try hard enough. And then we wonder why they don't renew their coaching contract or buy another container of our supplement. Well, they're not using it. They're not doing it. They're collecting more evidence that this doesn't work, and they're right again. So then not only can the only thing they ever do is ask for a refund or leave. When I call Susie in 6 months and I'm like, Susie, I found the best collagen supplement ever, and I'm so excited to get it. And Susie's going to be like, oh my God, if it's Vital Proteins, don't get that shit. It doesn't work. Because Susie's not going to say, hey, they sold it to me, then sold me 3 other products. I have 3 in my pantry that I didn't use, and I was so upset I asked for a refund. That's not what Susie's going to say. Susie's just going to be like, oh, it doesn't work. Get somebody else's.
That's right.
Right. And so as a book accord for everybody, like required reading, The Catalyst and Contagious by Jonah Berger. And do not read them to learn it. Read it till you know it, because it changes the game. And so, yeah, in that lens, the priority is always start and focus on where people are exchanging credit cards with you to achieve a goal. That's where the mistakes happen and matter the most. But then after that, the next order of priority is anybody who's exchanged information with you via email or credit card, via email or text or ManyChat or whatever, to get to an after state or closer to the goal, that you also plug those holes so that they can get the result and become ready to give the credit card in the next round, because that would have been the evidence required. So that's kind of the whole picture.
I think a few things that you brought up that I want to hit on real quick is that you talked about a lot of marketers do a lot of work for me. So this essentially comes, let's talk about word of mouth for a second. 93% of today's day and age of your business is word of mouth. That word of mouth is skipping the line on some of that process, right? We're going from word of mouth, typically goes right to the enrollment phase, because I've got the trusted source. I have all those things because this person has done all this legwork for me. And so when they come directly in based off that trusted source and they go into a phase, and then now we've had less communication prior, we've had less building of trust. And then when they purchase and they go into this funnel and then they fall into an abyss, that's like, well, Susan, you said this was great. Well, it is, but Susan also had the 97% of where we put our focus, which is prior to the transaction.
Yep.
Right. So this is where certain things inside your business become crucial, as George was talking about. And from the fitness community, I'll give you a great example. It's that whenever we say check-ins are at 9:00 on Friday, that's not 9:15. That's 9:00, because that's 15 minutes of wondering, did they forget about me? Am I no longer important? Is something wrong? Is it me? Did I do something? And then it's like, oh, sorry, I'm late. And that first time, like, you give them 15 minutes of anxiety that they didn't necessarily deserve as somebody that just paid you money.
Yep.
And so you haven't built the relationship yet, right? You haven't had all those things that have gone through. And that's just like one example of inside the service-based industry, right? And so talk about real quick too, right? We talked about product and how to use it and it just sitting on the shelf. I think that's one so many businesses miss out on. And it's because the only way that somebody's going to buy your service again is they got to use the product.
Yep.
Right. And so if no one's showing up to the calls that they're supposed to have, if no one's showing up, and I'll speak to myself on this too in a second. If they're not using the coffee, if they're not taking the protein, if they're not showing up to the group calls, then why do they need the service or product anymore when they already have it or have access to it? And so it's like, how are we getting them to show up and use it so they can see the result? Because they're not going to say, you know what, it's my fault, I haven't been doing it. They're just going to say it doesn't work or it's this other person's fault, because we don't like to take self-accountability for our own actions. Yep. That's just human nature in today's day and age, right?
Well, really what you're doing is when you're selling a product or service, you're helping somebody change behaviors so that they can get a result that they've never had before. You just forgot about it and thought that the magic pill and easy button that everybody on January 1st signs up for keeps them in the gym all year.
That's right.
right? But it doesn't, right? And so a couple things in response to what you said that I think are important is that even in understanding the customer journey that I explained earlier is like, why is somebody collecting evidence to feel safe? Well, when was the last time you took out your credit card when you felt unsafe about what you were about to pay for? Right. So, like, safety is the number one thing required for somebody to even pay. Well, what's the number one thing required for somebody to feel safe with the person they pay? Is a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the get-go, if it's ever about just the transaction, especially post-purchase, instead of it being a touch point to edify the relationship, it becomes evidence that it's actually less trustworthy than they thought because it's a complete pattern interrupt to the experience that happened before. And now they're like, I can't believe I agreed to go on this blind date before it even begins, just simply because we left them in the gap or we said the wrong thing or we made it more about the money than it was about their breakthrough. And so we lose the game before we even start. And then we wonder why our client doesn't show up to the gym excited tomorrow to put her running shoes on and go, work out. Right. So we have to remember that we also, and I think, Mike, one of the biggest mistakes that I see and that I made for years, like 100%, if I had to put one thing that stood in the way of me and $100 million of cash in my bank account right now, it was always forgetting that I'm in the after state. And that's many, many more than one step ahead of my current people's before state. And leadership is not doing it my way. It's adjusting the workout so that they can make progress and do it their way, including with my team and with my customers and with my coaching clients. Because yes, it's amazing that I get a client that does 7 figures a year and they want to get to 8. And they've also never been to 8 before. And so, yeah, it doesn't help them that I can be like, here's the workout I used to take that company to 20 that we'll use for you. If he can't do the workout, I have to be like, oh, great. He has no idea that we're going to be doing 95% touch and goes in 90 days. I should probably get him to like 70% in next month. And then I'll let him know what we're working towards, right? Like that's really what got in the way. And that not only includes in executing, either taking a product or a service, but also in how they speak about the journey in that product or service. And we forget that if somebody can't see themselves or their potential results in how we speak, they'll never have enough evidence to be able to pursue it. So I don't give a shit that you can tell them how you got there or how amazing you are or how your shit doesn't stink. But all that does is create codependency in your business and a whole ton of people that are mad at you. And then you chase your tail of bleeding buckets your whole career.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so people forget about this, but my number one reminder for Mike people is remember what it was like the first year of business where the only thing you could focus on was relationships and what mattered. And then eventually enough money came in where you're like, oh, I'm going to automate some of this, but you ended up accidentally automating everything that hurt the relationships and then they got in the way. And now you realize that without relationships that you have no business because not one business is scaled on acquisition. Every one of them is scaled on retention. And scale comes from subtraction and not addition, and depth and not width. And it's the depth of your relationships. And Mike knows this better than anybody. But any company that's ever scaled, when they have a hero SKU like a supplement company and they run on people to buy the hero SKU, the only reason line extensions are created are to create more people to use that hero SKU so that they can be in the community and keep using the product and be a walking billboard and testimonial, right? Well, it's no different in coaching. It's no different in the service-based industry, right? So even though I haven't taught them the mistakes, like when you think about this, anytime you interact with a customer or potential customer, you have to remember this and just write this down. Their results will tell them everything they need to know about you.
So it's funny you say that because there's 2 things I want to talk on here. So what you talked about just a second ago is meeting them where they're at. I say on every single call and every single video that if we have to meet the lead where they're at, not where we want them to be.
Yes.
And I use a great analogy is that you have 2 people that are going to run a marathon. You have the one coach that's going to stand at the finish line and say, run faster. And you have the other coach that's going to run it with them. Which one has a better chance of completion? The one that you meet them where they're at and you
Yep.
can coach them through the finish line versus yelling at them to do it, because the truth is that they need your help or they would be able to run the marathon by themselves.
Yep. 1,000%.
The other piece that I say all the time, and I give you a lot of credit this and a lot of video, is that what you said is that if we don't tell people what it is they need to know, we're not going to like the assumption of what it is that you do.
Yep.
Because I use this as an Instagram bio all the time. Like, who do we help and how do we help them? If we don't
Yep.
tell them, you're not going to like the assumption.
Nope.
And so too often times this goes to the same aspect, is like, we forget that, like, hey, like, we are fitness people or we are successful business owners, and we forget what it was like to start. And so you talk past where they're at and they're like, well, he only works with people that are at this certain level. It's like, well, that's why you got to talk about pain points that they have, not necessarily pain points that you have. So you got to speak to your ideal client on where they're at, not necessarily where you want them to be.
Yes. Yes. And I'm going to make a massive bonus point that I don't talk about on any really shows, but in the lens of pain points, also recognize that when you can speak to somebody's pain points, if you don't label them, you will attract problem aware people. But the moment you label them as symptoms of a pattern, you'll attract self-aware people that are interested in changing them. And so what I mean by that is a really easy example in the lens of fitness is right now, Mike and I could make one video and go sell it for $27 that says, hey, it's January 9th. And if you're already struggling with procrastination, consistency, and realizing that it's way harder to start and keep going than last January, and you want this year to be different, please give me your credit card and they're all going to be in. And all I'm going to attract is people that are addicted to procrastination, being addicted to their story, and addicted to their pain. But the moment I run the same thing and I'm like, oh my God, it's January 9th, right? Oh, let me guess. You've already missed 3 days and convinced yourself that it's not worth it this year, right? Yeah. Same story, different year. Truth be told, if you believe it, you're going to stay stuck. But if you recognize it's just a pattern, which just needs one new behavior, you can break it. And most people don't choose to avoid success. They behave their way away from it. So here, give me $27 and I'll give you the video to show how to break it once and for all. And now I have somebody who's interested in breaking it because I just labeled it a pattern, right? And so in that lens, it's so imperative and it's so important. And in there too, I think, and I'll just hit them real quick, Mike, just to give context, because in the lens of the mistakes, when I teach this to people, and this is all on my podcast too, so I'll get Mike the links and he can link to the full show where I talk about it ad nauseum. Mike will tell you I hit this like you wouldn't believe. So there are plenty of references for you, but people really have to understand that it's really like a core 3, and I have a bonus one now. But the 3 mistakes that I say are the zone of doubt, the inverse journey, and the drown the journey, right? And Mike's analogy around the running coach is one of the main ones that I use to teach people that, number one, you already know how to build the customer journey. You're just choosing not to. And number 2, if you don't do it, you can actually see how this is the only thing getting in the way, right? And so the 3 mistakes, the zone of doubt, what I tell people, I'm like, this is after any checkpoint moment or exchange of information where somebody is pursuing you, where the dopamine is wearing off. And the longer that zone exists, the faster the undercurrent of their anxiety and their doubts take over, deteriorating both of your chances of success, right? And so you give a keynote and Mike's in the audience. And he's like, George, I want to work with you tomorrow. I'll pay you $1 million on the spot. I'm like, amazing, man. I'll text you in a few minutes. And 3 hours later and 5 hours later, every moment that continues is me just draining my own bank account, right? And then you think about it in the lens of like, oh my God, George, I've been looking for you for my whole life. And I finally feel like you get me. And I would love your help. And I'm like, oh my God, just shoot me a DM on Instagram and I'll respond today and I'll send you that resource. And then I get busy and 3 days later, Susie's still waiting. That's the zone of doubt. That's the thing that gets in the way. A human being requires, and to the point earlier, in the lens of being able to see themselves, they have to be able to see themselves in a situation with a perceived benefit 2.5 times greater than their current situation in order for there to be enough evidence for them to commit to try it. That's all from the book, The Catalyst. Okay. But that means they have to be able to see themselves 2.5 times improved where they currently are. And so, in that lens of speaking to them earlier, the zone of doubt gets in the way because somebody will collect enough evidence, get really excited, come by our fitness program that we said would help, go to their inbox, it not be there, and then sit there for a day until she reaches out to us and says, I can't find it. And we're like, don't worry, jump on the call. And then she comes on the call overwhelmed. And then we make her wrong for not finding the email. And then she removes herself from the group. And then we bitch and complain that we have to hire somebody to chase her. And yet we said we were interested in helping her lose weight. But yet she walked into the gym and we threw her to the fucking wolves and we pretended like she lived in there. No, right? So that's the zone of doubt. The inverse journey is where any touch point where you're communicating with anybody you're going to help, where it's about you and not them or their results. I don't give a fuck what you've done. I don't care what you look like. I care what bridge you have to get them closer to where they want to look and what they want to feel. And so I don't care if somebody DMs you and they're like, George, give me your best 6-pack over 40 training that you made. Amazing. Well, I can send that one of two ways. I can send it and be like, Mike, thanks for checking out. Truth is like, I have the best fucking 6-pack in the world because I've been using this special workout for the last 10 years and nobody can do it better than me. So here's your video. Great. I just created codependency and I postured on somebody who's not going to even watch it now versus like, hey, Mike, I'm fucking stoked to send this video to you because I've genuinely only been using this one thing for the last 10 years. And maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But I promise you that even if you try it, it'll probably help you feel this and help you feel this, which is why I made the video. So I just want to shoot it open. If you have any questions, just shoot me a reply. I hope it helps. Boom. One's about them, one's about me, but I'm trying to do the same exact thing. One guarantees it doesn't happen. One guarantees it can happen. Right? So I don't even have a chance the other way. Instead, I just exacerbate somebody's pain points and convince them more that they can't do it on their own. So they have to hire me. And then codependency starts before they even pay me. And I wonder why my customer service is through the roof. So that's the inverse journey. And then the third one is the drown the journey, where we forget how far removed we are from their after state. And it doesn't matter that I have an 8-pack, but when Susie shows up, she can't go for a 1-hour run and look at all 3 months of workouts tomorrow and then be excited to do it when she gets her meal plan and then thinks she should throw out the whole fucking pantry and then bitches and complains that she spent $1,000 on new food, that it all went bad because she didn't know how to cook it. Right? Like that's what really happens because we overwhelm her, right? And so our message is only as effective as their ability to hear and understand it and implement it to make progress. And so what that simply means, and in your example, is like if I have somebody who signs up to lose 100 pounds with me in 12 months and Client A walks in and I'm like, hey, here's your workouts, meal plans, supplements, camera, and journal. I'll see you in 12 months. I can't wait to celebrate you and say, go. What are my chances of success? But on the second lens, I'm like, hey, man, we got a year. Truth be told, it's not about the number. It's about consistency. And so today I just want to celebrate you. So I want you to go home. You get to pick a dessert, but this time you get to celebrate yourself eating it instead of beating yourself up because you're not in a monogamous relationship with food. There's no cheating. There's only choices. And that's the first lesson because that's how we make this stick forever. And so also text me a picture of it because I'm going to live vicariously through you because it's been a minute, but I'll see you tomorrow morning and we're just going to go on a 20-minute walk and we're going to plan our breakfast for the next week and chunk it down piece by piece. And I meet him every day for a week and then once a week for 52 weeks. Which one's guaranteed to lose the weight? That's a customer journey. Mm-hmm. Same thing if you have kids. So if we don't take the time to build them, we forget that just because somebody calls me to be their Olympic gold medalist coach and says, I want to go from 100th to first, and I drop ship them the recipes and the workouts, doesn't mean they know how to implement them. Or in the moment they paid me, when they're in the carpool lane picking up their kids from school, they want an email 7 seconds later. It says, great, watch this video, whitelist my email, go submit this, do your height and weight, submit your before photo, and then we'll see you on the call tomorrow. Oh, and if you're not done, don't bother showing up because you're not going to lose weight. Right? And so those mistakes get in the way everywhere. and they tend to be the biggest ones. And most people just accidentally create them and they're convinced it's like, oh, my workout program sucks. I'm like, no, if you call me to sign up to run a marathon, and I'm like, great, you can either put your shoes on right now, Mike, and go run 26.2 miles, or hey, we're going to take the next couple of days and we're going to prep you to make a plan so that you can have boom, boom, boom. So when you start, you feel ready. That's really all we're doing, is making it so somebody actually has a chance to accomplish the goal.
Right. Too
Right.
oftentimes they say like, hey, a lot of people's like, hey, I need you to eat this elephant versus like, hey, I need you to eat this bite.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And then tomorrow we're going to have 2 more.
Yeah. And like what I think is so fucking nuts in the fitness industry is that like the number one baked in universal law of results is consistency over intensity in every single bucket. Like it is the number one thing that if you know nothing about helping people and you just get them to walk 10,000 steps a day, they could pay you $300 a month for fitness coaching because their habit stacking would include sleeping more because they were tired, eating better so their muscles didn't hurt, drinking more water because they were dehydrated, and literally adjusting their diet without noticing because they felt better. Right. And then we literally spend 3 months convincing people that it's been done wrong and there's a different way, and we make it so simple and so fucking easy. And then they come in and we're like, great, here's these words you've never seen, these numbers you've never seen, and I need you to do it all at once. Good luck. And we're like, what happens? I'm like, I don't know. I can't figure it out. And then we make business decisions based on that. And we're like, okay, well, I guess our customers only stay in our membership for 3.5 months. That's what it is. Okay, let's work on getting this acquisition cost down because we're going to have to spend more now because our LTV is only 9 months, instead of like, hey, maybe we should realize that those items on the buffet that everybody said they wanted to eat forever, they're no longer eating. And it might not be the patrons, right? Like it might be Old Country Buffet over here, and it might need a little refresh or some Gordon Ramsay kitchen nightmares, right?
Yep.
And so yeah.
There's a few things that it really come up to my mind, and this is probably like, I think, beating the dead horse at this point, but one of the things that made me really understand, I think, George's entire customer journey was understanding like, hey, like, I want you to view that if I give you directions to come to my house and you're going to type it into Google Maps and it's going to be like, drive, I'll tell you when to turn, but you don't know when that's coming up. Are you going to drive 35 or are you going to go 60, the speed limit? Because truthfully, like, you're going 35 because like, I don't know when he's going to tell me to turn. I'm passing on a lot of roads. And so you have all this anxiety because I can't see where the next turn is.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I implemented based off of our call 13 months ago, starting in this new business, or really niching down in the business, was when somebody signs up with us, it's go ahead and book this call now. You're going to receive a text message tomorrow with something to fill out. And then it's going to lead you with the next steps and what you need to do. But for now, I want you to just celebrate of taking the next step in the business. And that's all I want you to worry about. I don't want you to worry about anything other than you just booking this call now. And today you're done. As one of the things that I kind of realized is that you kind of put into play here is that I just went through a big ordeal of giving somebody money. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of decision making.
Yep.
And the last thing I want to do after giving somebody a lot of money is do a lot of work. I don't want to have to start my account now. I don't want to have to do this. I just spent an hour on the phone with you. And it's like, you got to take these off piece by piece. So whenever you sell somebody something, don't give them 47 pieces of homework. Give them one. And then tomorrow we're going to tell you what to do the next day, and the next day, and the next day. I have found that the more I put on somebody's plate, the less they get accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm a really big fan of speed because we got to get that client activated. And so another thing that you also can do is, and George hadn't necessarily talked about this, but I like to do it, is go ahead and book a call that's immediate and then one that's a follow-up many weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see also where I'm going to be at, because that way, let's say in the first 3 weeks, and you don't have calls with a person, let's just say, then it's like, we're going to speak in 6 weeks from now, but now they know, okay, well, we're going to talk again in 6 weeks. So let me do all my due diligence. And when it comes to adhering to a program, I have a lot of coaches that come through, and I don't care if it's business, lifestyle, fitness, or health, whatever. Like, well, it's just calls with people at will when they need them. And I absolutely hate this mentality, because what happens is that if I don't know when my check-in is, aka my accountability to you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say, hey, I need a call after I made a poor decision, because no one wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I need a title on myself. But if I know I have a call with you in 2 weeks, I'm probably going to eat good this weekend because I know I'm checking in a week.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me adhere to the program, do the accountability if I know when my next checkpoint is. So too often we leave it open-ended on this customer journey instead of leading when the next step is going to be. When it also comes to, if you sell let's say a 6 months up front, you don't have to collect payment again. But most people don't understand is that on a monthly, and I'm a firm believer that every call is a sales call,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to build that relationship with an individual and help them see results. But what I also like to focus on is that whenever we have calls set versus at will, when you're selling a monthly program, if they're MIA for 2 weeks and leave the plan, why do they want to like let their payment go through when they're not adhering to it? But if I have calls in place, then I can coach them through even before that next payment comes through. Because most of the time when we hire somebody, I don't need it for when life is good. I need it for when life happens. And so no one's going to schedule a call when shit hits the fan. But if the call's
Mm-hmm.
already scheduled, I can get you through when shit hits the fan. And this is also too, like when it comes to sales, and I love to use this on sales calls when I was selling fitness. It's like, well, I've got a lot going on right now. And it's like, so now you need it more than ever, because you're not going to need it when things are good and your kids are in school and
Nope.
life's perfect. You need it going through and through the holidays. You need it in these transitional points, because you've already stated you've yo-yoed and gone through all these things. So let me be there and guide you through those hard places.
Yep. Yeah.
And
I
so
have a
there's
couple. Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
no, no, I was just simply saying, like, there's many forms of customer journey, and that's just another example of keeping them in the retention, because as George said, scale doesn't come through acquisition, it comes through retention.
For sure. So the way that I like, your metaphors, I literally just tell me when you want to visit, so we can just sit in the office and jam for a day, like just
Sure.
selfishly, and we'll record it too or whatever, or map out whatever. But just let me know when you want to visit. But like when we not but end cancel end when thinking about it, right? The way that I like to think about this to frame it really simply is like whatever the lens of your business and expertise, think about it as a personal trainer and you are the best at it, right? And I call you and you're like, I have your answer. Well, when you say I have the answer, what you're basically telling me is that if I bench, deadlift, and squat, I'll achieve the goal. That's amazing. That's what everybody has to know. But once I pay you, it's your job, even if you don't talk to me, to tell me the sets and reps and structure to follow so that I have the best chance of success. And what ends up happening for a human being, when somebody pays for the information, the moment they pay, they're no longer paying for information. They're actually paying for the structure and the path to implement that information. That's what they paid for. And so even if you only get on one call, what I say in customer journey is that they have to have the best chance of success, or you can't be the reason they don't.
Mm.
And when people can see that somebody has a plan, that's what makes them feel safe. I understand you, and we're going to follow these simple steps. I understand you, and we're going to follow these simple steps. And we forgot to install the simple steps. But what ends up happening is that if somebody misses 2 calls, but the call structure exists, instead of them being like, oh, I'm such a failure, or Mike isn't supporting me, they're like, holy moly, they said this would happen. Oh, I'll just jump on a call. It's here. This is about consistency. And it's baked in at many, many levels, but it also changes their ability to go from blaming to asking for help, because we agreed and said the structure is here. And if this happened, boom, and just jump on a call. And so it makes people actually feel safe enough to navigate what we're helping them do, which is to install something that they've never installed permanently before to change the results in their current life that are actually getting in the way of what they want, right? And so it's really about just understanding it. But even at the level of me, like I used to, like back when I started consulting and I didn't know what I was doing or selling, I would just get on calls with people for like 4 hours. And then when I literally learned of like, wait, I can listen to you for 10 minutes. And if I can articulate that I heard everything, be like, yep, we're going to do part 1, part 2, and part 3. And they're like, yeah, that's what we want. I'm like, yeah, I have part 1, part 2. And they're like, cool, we're in. Calls went from 4 hours to 15 minutes. And then the numbers being transacted are 6 figures, right? But it's not, it's that people understand when they're looking for something, that what they're looking for is that somebody has a plan that works or that they can follow. They don't need the details of the plan. They don't want to know that you have 4 sets of 12 as a warm up and then your RPE is based on this and you're hitting six. No, they'll worry about that shit when they're on the field. They just want to know that when they come in, you're like, yep, I'm going to take a breath. I'm in the right place. Okay, cool. I'm going to get prepared. Cool. This is the path I'm going to follow. And people forget that, but that's really what success boils down to. And somebody asked me like, George, how did you scale all those supplement companies to $1 billion? And I was like, I got people results and got them addicted to the product. And then they just kept buying more and they told all their damn friends. And then the more results they got, the more of the product they wanted. And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, yeah, every one of them, because we don't lose if people don't take it. So we don't exist as a company to sell the product or service. We exist as a company to help integrate that product or service into people's lives so they can use it on their own.
I think I've been using customer journey before I knew I was doing it. And I give a great example to a lot of fitness coaches or really any type of coach. Again, and go back because we work with coaches and consultants of whatever space, is that the calls that I have with people are not to talk about so much so about how the last 2 weeks went, but what are we doing over the next 2 weeks? Because let's forget the monetary standpoint, but I'll come back to that in a second. It's that I need to guide you through what's going to happen, not
Yep.
what's already passed, because all we're going to talk about is how you could have been better. But I can't give you confidence going forward if I talk about the mistakes that you made. And so it's not about the party that you went to where you had the pizza. It's about 2 weeks from now, you're going to go, let's just say it's Valentine's Day. Okay, well, let's go enjoy ourselves on Valentine's Day, or let's go do this thing. And then let's plan it so that you can do it guilt-free. And then they're able to come back with a win instead of coming back with, well, I ate this thing because we didn't plan and talk about it. So customer journey being that we're going to think forward instead of thinking backwards to help them use your service, use your product, and essentially move forward. And I think also too, when you're selling different services or products, how many different ways can we implement that product to help in different areas of our life?
Yep.
Right. When it comes to the monetary standpoint, a lot of people are like, well, we're going to get on a call right before the program ends. And it's like, so you're going to have to sell them again. But remember what I said is that every call is a sales call. And so if we have multiple checkpoints throughout that 6-month program, why do I even have to sell you at the last one? Because they know you're getting on the phone with them to sell them, because they know when their money runs out, I promise you. But if we have multiple through it, I might sell you at month 3 or 4 on continuation because I sold you in the excitement of seeing results, not whenever the money is running out.
Yep.
Right. And so that's considered with an upsell as we go through that journey. Right. Another big aspect I like to talk about too in that customer journey, and this one relates really to fitness, is that it's not so much about us losing the weight, but keeping it off. So it's like I'm instilling certainty that we're going to hit the goal. But the problem is that you've already hit the goal once before. So how do we keep this long term and turn into a lifestyle? So it's like, yeah, you might only need 3 months to lose the 15 pounds. But the reason we need to do 6 months is that you never have to pay me again to do this.
Yeah. And there's a point there that can be summarized in a fortune cookie. And the big mistake people make that you just nailed right there is that they try to sell the bridge instead of selling the island and using the bridge as the tool to get there. Right. And so that's probably one of the biggest flaws that people make is they sell the workout program, they sell the keto lifestyle, they sell the this rather than what's the benefit on the other side, because it really never is about the bridge, but that's what starts that cycle.
Mhm. And so I also talk about this in a sales call, essentially, is like selling the emotions versus the metrics.
Yep.
Like no one cares about how many sets and reps and this, that, whatever we're doing inside the business. They care about the results they're going to get from it. Because the truth is that somebody's paying you for a service. They're not doing it because either they don't know how or two don't want to do it. And so when
Nope.
you're selling me, I need to eat chicken and broccoli and cardio 2 hours a day. It's like, you're selling me blood, sweat, and tears. That sounds miserable. I want no part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do
Yeah.
want the bikini body.
Exactly.
So focus
Exactly.
on the bikini body, keeping the bikini body. And when they start to ask about what the program looks like, that's a customized thing. That's what they're paying for. So it's like,
Yep.
it's the same thing talks about like giving people macros for free. It's like, yeah, I'm going to give you the template. But the truth is, if I give you those macros now, you're not going to see the results that you would if you had somebody monitoring and making those adjustments along the way. And again,
Yep.
that's talking about what the future holds for somebody, not just
Yep.
like what it is you need to do today. Because if you're looking for
Yep.
something fad and quick and easy, just Google it. You can do that. It's very simple. 1.2
That's it.
million articles on how to lose fat, and they all work
They do.
if you implement them.
Yeah. There's an important point that I can give in like a minute that will help people understand content and ideas too. But like, even to your point, like my favorite quote that I wrote in my journal last year, because, I just lost 80 pounds again because I wanted to be not fat and emotionally baggaged anymore. Right. But, I heard Mike Tyson say the magic you're looking for is in the work you won't do. And I realized it was missing something for me. And I added, and the feelings I wouldn't feel, right? Like not like magically shifted it for me. But in the lens of content, and I'm saying this because people have struggled with this for 10 years and they shouldn't when it comes to content. And I used to fuck with audiences all the time, like marketers. And I'd be like, all right, cool. You guys are really smart, right? There's a ton of millionaires in this room. Like, you guys all make millions of dollars in marketing. Like, yeah, I'm like, cool. Can somebody explain to me the difference between a piece of content that I give away for free, a piece of content that somebody opts in for, and a piece of content that somebody pays for? And I heard every possible imagine. I won't test anybody here. Oh, well, they do this and they do this. And I'm like, you guys are all fucked. This is why you're all losing. It's really, really simple. Every ounce of free content is just an idea. The moment you put structure on how to achieve that idea, people give you their email. And then the moment you take that same idea, you add structure, accountability, and personalization, they pay you for that idea. Stop thinking you don't have any content. It's always the same. It's the level at which you're holding somebody accountable, them doing it themselves, or how they're implementing it, that changes what bucket they end up into. And it will never be anything more than that, ever.
So I think in 3 words, you can put that into idea, template, and implementation.
1,000%. 1,000%. That would be the easiest way to anchor that in. Because like, this better than anybody. You listen to my podcast and you're like, no, like, you genuinely know I literally give it to people for free. I'm like, if you go do this and you add your ingredient, this works. And then they'll listen to it, and then they'll come to an event for $700, and then they'll have me personalize it a little bit, and then they'll go make 30 grand a month, and then they'll call me, and then I'll help them implement it deeper at a personalized level on a retainer. But it's the same thing.
Yep. So it's the same guys as like, I'm just going to roll this back to fitness just because that's primarily what people are on here, is that you create this idea on some different protein ideas. And the next one is like, we're going to give some, a template on when or how to eat these certain foods. And then the implementation would be like, how do we customize these to fit you and your family?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just like getting more and more and more in depth. How many people do you talk to that are so afraid to give out free information?
All of them. 9 out of 10 of them. 9 out of 10 of them. And literally, I'm like, here's what you don't have to understand. It's the best fucking filter that you could ever have in your entire life and ecosystem. Because here's the thing. My calendar. People call, I want to make billions. I want to make millions. I hear all of it. Right?
Sure.
All of it comes in. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get on a call with somebody and I'm like, I don't want to work with this person and they're not a good fit. I just stop and I literally am like, listen, you can't afford me. Can I just give you the thing that will make you be able to afford me in like 6 months? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, listen, write this down, record this, right? Like, go. If I give that to them and they do nothing with it, and anybody asks them about me, the worst thing they can say is, we tried to hire this guy for X amount of dollars. He said no and said, actually, I want to give it to you for free and help you make more money, and we didn't watch it. Cool. They watch it and they're like, we just want him to do this. We're calling him back. We make a plan. They watch it and it works. They call me 3 months, 6 months. They watch it works. They never need me. They will forever send people my way. They watch it and don't watch it. They'll never call me again. And I'm not chasing somebody that should have never been my client in the first place.
So basically, what you did is you saved yourself a bad client, bad rotation, and a headache.
And so when I say to people on my podcast, our job isn't to find our ideal client, it's to create them. Everybody's my client. It's just a matter of when and if I let you in the bucket. But for me, I can't lose if I tell you exactly how to do it, because if you take that and implement it and it works right away, should you have hired me in the first place? Probably not. And so for me, I hate losing. So I made a game that I can't. And so I give it all away for free. And the worst that happens is people use it and they send more people my way. And the best that happens is they're like, we want you next to us as we do this. I'm like, great, let's go.
Well, what it does is that whenever we give away a lot of free stuff, is that those that take action, right, which is not most people, but those that do take action now fall in love with what you did for them and they become advocates of you. And
That's
then,
because they collect
then they
evidence.
just say how much, not yes or no.
It's all like, I tell people, everybody's out here fishing and I have fish jumping in my boat because you're all trying to convince people they need you. And I'm like, you don't. Let me show you. Go do this. They win in their life and they come back for more.
It's the difference
You can,
of trying to win in 7 days versus 7
yeah,
weeks or 7
yeah.
months.
Like I tell everybody at every lens of my business, I'm like, I'm not allowed to ask for money until you've won first, or else we don't have a relationship. We're just codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that game though, it's always fit. And I'm like, you hungry? They're like, no. I'm like, great. Stay in the cafeteria. Call me if you get hungry.
That's right.
Like, that's what it boils down to,
Yep.
right? That's my relationship with Rob, with you, with anybody. I'm like, hey, I'm here always, and you are welcome in my house. You are welcome in my cafeteria. I will even feed you for free. But if I start running low or I need to pay my staff, I'm going to let you know.
Right.
Right? Like, that's really what it is. Anytime you text me, I'm like, I'm in. And then if you're like, hey, I need you in person, I'm like, cover my plane ticket, my hotel, I'm in. If you're like, I need you for 3 days, I'm like, hey, I might need them to pay me, bro.
Yeah, for sure, man. Dude, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. Number one place, easiest place is my website. Make it really easy. It is the biggest vomit of pink you will ever see because it's beautiful, and it's mindofgeorge.com. But everything's up there for you. Our podcast is up there. And what I say is just take a tune around. Like, don't get addicted to me. Don't stick around. But if something tickles your fancy, then pursue it, because we're loaded with resources. Everything's out there: customer journey, mindset, business. And then you'll see our alliance, which is our little community where we help people implement this stuff, for $100 a month, but it's all there. And I will say this to any of you, and I say this to Mike too. If I ended up opening any loops, confused you, overwhelmed you, you want to tell me to fuck off, you like my pink shoes, I'm genuinely wearing pink shoes. They always are pink. Okay. Just hit me up on Instagram. But if you have any questions about anything Mike and I covered, he'll vouch for me. I genuinely just want to answer your question. I just don't want to leave any open loops for you. And so if it's book recommendations, a business question, just shoot me a DM on Instagram and I will personally respond. So my Instagram is It's George Bryant, and the it's is included. So it's technically it's
George Bryant.
Yeah. Because some 86-year-old realtor in Michigan in like 2008 wouldn't give me the website, but he had George Bryant at Gmail, and I had to choose between the George Bryant, which felt a little conceited, and it's George Bryant. Like, hey, it's. And so I was like, this is the greatest email. And then you get on the first phone call with your insurance company, like, what's your email? I'm like, it's George Bryant at gmail.com. They're like, okay, I got it. George Bryant. I'm like, no, it's George Bryant. Like, the it's is included. And now it's been my nightmare ever since.
Yeah. So I went the opposite direction. One of my first emails was thefitlegacy@gmail.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people are going to suddenly realize that I intentionally gave out my actual personal email on the podcast, but they'll think I did it accidentally.
That's pretty smart. Do not email mine. That's not what I use anymore.
What's funny is the best thing I ever did, Mike, is people told me I was crazy. I'm like, you guys lose because you do marketing wrong. I'm like, I have no website, no social media. I'm like, I'll show you. So I went on Dillard's podcast and I gave out my personal email. And Dillard show. And everyone's like, oh my God. I'm like, no, I was also specific and I built a customer journey. And I said, I'm going to give you my personal email. I'd love to help you for free. So when you email me, use this exact subject line and include this information. And if you don't, I will delete your email and not even respond. And so of the people that did, 83 people emailed me, and then 43 of them ended up as clients.
Smart man.
So yeah,
Well, dude,
there's always divergent ways to play the game.
See, the difference between I think a trainer or a person that sells something and a business owner is the creativity and understanding that, like, he knows whenever you email, you're going into this particular customer journey to where I've got the resources in which I want to send you because I know the things you're going to bring to me. And it's just forward thinking too oftentimes. So I'll essentially end on this. Is this something that we've essentially developed that really for us is understanding the customer journey from a social standpoint is we got our I4 method. And you haven't heard this.
Oh, sweet.
So our I4 method is insights, interactions, impact, and income. Too oftentimes people go directly to trying to collect income. And so insights being education, this is the free information which we put out, which then lead to interactions, which is where the acquisition and conversation comes. And then we have impact, where this is typically where we're trying to have better retention, reduce our churn, and then income. And then it becomes a full circle of that nature. So insights, interactions, impact, and income. Now, what AR funnel does essentially is focuses on the interaction portion, which we typically lack, which is where we implement.
What was the insights again?
So insights is education. This is where you're going to learn about your business.
Yep.
So it's insights, which is education and learn. Then we have interactions, which is the acquisition, and then the earn process where we're trying to earn their business. And then we have retention or impact, which is retention. Now you can see where I have AR, which was acquisition retention funnel.
Yep.
So we want to learn, earn, reduce churn. And then we go into income, which is the fourth one, which in my opinion, when you're able to do those three easily, then the income is just going to come by nature. But if we go
1,000%
straight to income, which typically we see a lot of coaches do in every coaching space, is like, apply to work with me. Like, you're only going to get those that are ready to jump in your boat, which is only, if we look from an e-commerce standpoint, that's 3% of people, but every 7, 8, 9-figure company have a pop-up on the website knowing that that's not going to happen. And we'll get a 33% roughly to opt in, so we can start those interactions. And so you don't realize that these are what you're currently doing. So if you're somebody that is selling something of any nature, don't go straight for the income. You want to go into education. You want to go into the interactions, go into the impact you can make, and income will follow, which George just, showed that he's only trying to do those three things.
And I'll say this because everybody asked me, like, if I had to summarize, like, how did I scale every company to 8 and 9 figures and beyond, is everybody went after the 3 and all I did was build the 97. That's it. The 97% that didn't buy is the bucket that I love, but we also forget that bucket of non-buyers is who accounts for 90+% of our buyers who find us through the marketing and word of mouth of the people who are collecting evidence to buy. Mm-hmm. And so they are the most important ones and always will be. And so when I tell people the greatest thing the Marine Corps ever taught me about leadership was that I couldn't fire any of my Marines, even in the middle of combat. And so leadership is when the last person gets home because they matter just as much as the first person.
Right on, man. Well, dude, it's a pleasure as always, man.
Dude, we're doing now. We can do this anytime you like. I will do this with you all day. Some coffee, some conversation.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
in, bro.
Cool, dude. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, man.
My biggest takeaway podcast.